You've heard the adage, who watches the watchman? Well, you can't very well watch the watchman when you don't even know who's lurking. You'll notice my channel that after you watch it, it continues to register that there have been no watches. You probably heard of certain foundational rights, the right to be advised of the charges against you to prevent the whole rule of law from devolving into an existential crisis manufactured by powerful people or administrations in spite for the rights of the accused or the right to confront the person who's doing the accusing. In my case, this was all waved away by a script called I Am the Walrus. Nobody is willing to admit that this happened. Zelensky, Vladimir number one, we'll give him number one status because he's defending his country from wrongful invasion, has never spoken out for the arrest of Gail Burston. Now, he's an Israeli commando sort, and although that doesn't implicate him, his failure to call for her arrest does. Needless to say, Putin has made Frank Zappa type stuff about the CIA being behind AIDS. His gangs in Russia, at least, have made various false sponsor accusations, but have never called for the arrest of Gail Burston. So, um, no matter whether they battle themselves to balls of steel, as Zen walking through fire, Knights of Resignation defending the Vox Populi. They have never called for the arrest of Gail Burston. It's absurd to say she's not implicated in AIDS. Her name is part of a name index. Gail Carolyn Burston is a homophone for Christian Armageddonism. Even without the war plan on Mount Desert and even without the evidence from Hitler Reagan semiotics, Gay Ill Christmas Carolyn Bombs Bursting is a Star Spangled Banner type image for Christian Armageddonism. But there's no point in never minding. Zell Spoke is reported, and there's a card indicating that he affirmed it. But it plays into the notion of a cruel lampoon of a deaf man that Clinton and her Israeli attorneys, like Miles Kirshner and Mike Exler, were given permission to conjure up for Donald Trump in the AIDS attack. So you have a situation where there's no opportunity to watch the Watchmen. People don't even know the degree to which they can watch in this hybrid zone of Pentagon Disney, which has new age capacities that aren't even being recognized. Now, the reason I blame the FBI is that it was obvious when I went to the pit news as a deaf man and started reasoning out in public the attack by Reagan on liberalism and on climate ecology to raise my profile just a little bit because of the brutal murdering underworld who had kidnapped and tortured me. And what the administration was allowed to do instead of genuine insight and exercising law to protect the victim of torture, they started raking calls with this idea that they should be allowed to police my ideals, to lampoon my private behavior. And remember, this cruel lampoon was being executed against a deaf victim a deaf person who had been tortured and had an implanted neuroplasm. They themselves wanted to make a lampoon, a caricature of a deadbeat liberal. And the Israelis who tortured me and who released aides and who wrote the script were allowed to do this by Hillary Clinton. Why would it have happened? Well, one of the things that has come out about our society is that we're becoming a cancel culture for an arc that includes Trump queers. So the arc, the symbols of freedom survive while they take these drastic actions like the pepper virus, COVID 19. The idea of an aristocracy of talent goes back to W.E.B. Du Bois, even subscribed to it when he talked about the talented tenth of the American Negro. The idea of equity comes out when you grant Japan the right to avenge Hiroshima and Native Americans to the right to avenge the smallpox. And this is the thinking behind the hybrid war that came out of UW Dialectical and the Israelis of the University of Pittsburgh while they were ripping off our museums. Now, the aristocracy of talent doesn't get very much airplay because they look at someone like me and they scream the white thinks it's in the aristocracy of talent while it has its foot on the black man's promise. Well, it turns out one of the men they lampooned and murdered spent his career in higher education trying to make it possible for more black people to be advanced. And he started out in the 40s with a book that's still in print in India called America's Stake in Human Rights. So the knife that they're holding in broad daylight is a symbol of the postal worker union. The knife that they're holding in broad daylight is a symbol of the NAACP. It's a complaint, but it's a complaint against the rule of law. They don't really believe they belong in the aristocracy of talent. They believe they belong in the arc of colors. So Duvall, even a black man in Pittsburgh, said, I know AIDS is man made. I know Bush was behind it, and I support him for it. How lovely. How do you get this idea that the aristocracy of talent is acceptable but not acceptable? A is not A. Logic is not logic. Reason is not reason. Well, it goes back to the Beatles in the Kennedy assassination. Of course, they wanted to cut America out of the deal when they said the British Army had just won the war when blowing his mind out in the car. And you might not think that that's what really happened, but take a look at what happened with Circe Kennedy. Circe Kennedy was redacted by the Beatles Mafia. They wrote a song about JFK has to pay through the guitar of Bob Dylan. And then they delivered my reply to her mother with the murder of two more Kennedys. Now, the FBI claimed that it was an anonymous call that tipped them off to the bodies in the bottom of the lake. But I don't believe they don't know who the people in the post office are. I don't believe it. They immediately pounced through the Seattle Clubhouse movement to depict the card as Kennedy merchandise, the card that was written to me by Circe's mother. They believed that Circe was simply merchandise. Donald Trump sees all people as simply merchandise. There's a book called by Rebecca Koffler, not Alvin Toffler, Rebecca Koffler, who plays certain kinds of stylized totalitarian arguments about the need to suppress dissent as a Russian weapon. That these Russians are fomenting protests in the streets, and tampering with our enterprise. Anything sympathetic to Russia is playing to the delusion machine being mongered by Putin. The case she makes about the Ukrainian invasion, if you look at it from even a second from Putin's point of view. She describes the terrible home invasion of the system that he was raised in, the KGB, and the fury of the Eastern Germans towards them when righteous wrath, when the wall came down. And he said nobody came to the defense. It was like the government of Russia didn't exist anymore. So it's sort of a chivalrous notion that he should protect the people of Donbass and make clear that the Russian government is still capable of protecting its people. Well, the notion that Putin has some kind of authority over dissent in America is subtext of this, even if it's in inverse proportion to his power to deceive. So, what I think happened was, see, when it comes to Donald Trump, his sidekick, James W. Child, upon whom be peace, may he rest in peace, and the coward, insidious ringleader, Robert Fripp of King Crimson. Anything that they can comprehend makes sense to their minds is a green light. It's a go. It made sense to their stupid minds, so give it a go. And what Fripp evidently wangled and wheedled and durfed ho with Trumpy Tune was the idea that if James Crary shows such levity, such laughing gas tendencies towards the idea that questioning authority in America is treason, let's let the expert on treason, Putin, execute him under their bylaws, because they were, after all, partners in keeping the business about Gail Burstyn secret and actionable. A hybrid work through the entertainment media of non-news. Rather than fake news, it was non-news. And so they tortured me again. They lied about me some more. Then they made me a deadbeat liberal as a joke. So how do you think now, dog eyes? Well, they were all set forth with storylines about having balls of steel, the Zen walking through the flames, because they want to torture somebody and burn them alive with AIDS and watch on a brain beam. This is the hideous Microsoft experiment as a backlash against sin, clocked to COVID-19 and the phasing out of Roe versus Wade, parochial backlash. Find lots of parochial about and let them speak about it. And at the end of the day, aren't we lucky? So saving Donbass was sort of an act of chivalry, but it's not the sort of chivalry that you can overly admire. That's for sure. They killed thousands of innocent people and children, and it comes down to this argument that freedom is the starvation is that there's a line where there's not enough for everybody. Yeah, that's why I wear a T-shirt sometimes that says "cardboard fan," because those players we admire are in the talented tenth, and we're just like now cardboard in the audience. When we were available, we were the flock whose function was to cheer them. Forget about being people who deserve food on the table. And far from trying to feed more people, far from trying to end hunger, they're using this line of reasoning to turn us into cardboard fans, to eradicate as many of us as we can with the fair play of COVID-19. And of course, I do blame the FBI. They're the ones who mongered blacking out my right to know who's accusing me and of what. They're the ones who fomented non-news about Gail Burstyn. They're the ones who equated dissent with spying. They're the ones who wake me up to voices saying I'm going every day for 20, 30 years. I wake up to voices saying you're going to prison for a long time, Jim. They have nothing they can accuse me of. What are they going to accuse me of? Being loyal to Circe Kennedy? That's quite an allegation, and make it actionable in their cruel minds. They say they have these people from the Ku Klux Klan who are lawyers who are friendly with judges in Pittsburgh, like Robert Downey. He's always the death penalty for this, death penalty for that. I mean, he's really death penalty happy. Food weapon for this, food weapon for that. He's death penalty happy. I mean, he probably sees Dee Dee seducing me. Oh, he deserves the death penalty for being seduced by Dee Dee. Yeah, never mind any of the facts about what happened. These people are those like Robert Fripp, derping host, sniveling as he lies, the parochial savage of the rock industry of all the places in the world for the for the Burgermeister parochialism to jump out of the rabbit's hat. It's in Mick Jagger's backyard. They believe that the ends justifies the means. It was the ends justifying the means argument that put Northwood's plan on JFK's desk. Then he said, "You're crazy. I'm not going to bomb America as a pretext for starting a war with Cuba. You're absolutely out of your mind." Well, who does it turn out are the closet traitors? People who dissent things like that are the closet traitors. Ain't that something? Talk about a whirly gig of mind control. So the alternative handling of the dissenter who opposed Northwoods is proof that the aristocracy of talent belongs rightly in the hands of European berserkers, knowledgeable about hybrid behavior, and this is their idea that a deaf man they lampooned cruelly, and a deaf girl with Down syndrome whose teeth are falling out, who they raped, are somehow subhuman because we won't walk like Zen through Andrew Cho's fire with to amuse Penis Gabriel. And this is all perfectly clear from everything that they did. And the way that they hide it, you see, to have a hidden transcript this pernicious, which is a very pernicious hidden transcript, requires a hidden man. John Galt. Who is John Galt? Where was the question about the anonymous power broker behind the scenes in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged story? The idea of a John Galt person. Who is John Galt? The hidden man. The power of the fourth dimension, the true aristocracy of talent, who's led all of these lemmings to the inner light so that they can walk through fire and leave Earth gracefully. It's her. Who is it? Who is it? Well, he put out an album called Double Fantasy, and he used the double, and there's nobody. I have other tapes to talk about, and the whole thing is perfectly clear. They even did a dry run. Some people still remember all the stuff about Paul is dead. Who is his mysterious double? They had it all planned. They jumped right on America to cut us out of the World War II victory deal and turned it around through their biblical sages in Hollywood, like Cecil B. DeMille, who was appointed to Radio Free Europe for Alan Dulles. Like Alan Dulles is going to Radio Free Europe everybody that Kennedy should be praised for scoffing at Northwoods. Be serious. Putin's secret playbook was written by Donald Trump. These men are partners. Zelensky has never called for the arrest of Gail Burstyn. And I'm just a deaf man who they brutally tortured. Hillary Clinton allowed the Israelis to do it. She said it was over a letter. Free speech for everyone but me. I'm not allowed free speech. Free speech about a girl's curse of virginity unrequited was regarded as proof of rape, so they violated Circe Kennedy before they murdered her. Gee, that's higher.